everybody? Hope everybody is well. Hit that like as you come in. Hit the like as you come in. Because today I want to do something a little different. Because as you can see, the title is not Supreme Conversation. And no, I'm not waiting for anybody to get in. But I am going to say this. On the channel itself, it reads this little thing called join. Pick a tier, join in, let's go. Now, the second part of that is, gotta make sure we can hear, make sure everything rolling. Hit that like as you come in. Oh yeah, we in there. We in there. Oh Jesus, oh Jesus, oh okay. There we go. Okay. Now, what I want everybody to understand, want to get in context, is I'm gonna give a kind of a detailed convo on Terryville, Ohio. And the reason I'm gonna do that is because it's a stance case, and what I call, or a case that set precedent, which kind of bodied into a lot of other cases, because it's also the premise of the New York lawsuits for stop and frisk. And there was a video I did with I believe it was 24K music or something like that, but it was their video, and I actually broke it down because there was an instance in there where I spoke about, or where the officer stated that I want to do pat down but not a search, right? He said, because Terryville, Ohio, what you're talking about is a Terry. No, because this is what we talk about, because I actually spoke about, in order for an officer to perform a pat down, he or she must point to the dangerous area, and that's where they can search, or that's where they can perform the pat down. Why? Because officer safety is not law. Your feelings do not determine law. And Terryville, Ohio is one of the cases that he referenced. And here's why the officer, was incorrect even in his reference of Terryville, Ohio, but it's also something within it that most of us don't know. Now, I actually wrote this one, or actually did a letter to someone on this one in 2015. And basically it was the explanation of a pat down, because it was to one of my friends who was an officer. And again, we have these spirited conversations. I use spirited because while we see the world differently, they're performing in this world as a police officer, and they are in the midst of their training and also decision making. And anybody that's around me, they're going to make a decision about something. They're going to think about something. So the conversation was the actual pat down. And I gave him Terryville, Ohio, and he corrected, no, it's not a Terry search. I said, no, understand this. Because in Terryville, Ohio, the United States Supreme Court ruled that a person can be stopped and briefly detained by a police officer based on a reasonable suspicion of involvement in a punishable crime. Remember that. If the officer has reasonable suspicion that the detainee is armed, the officer may perform a pat down of the person's outer garments for weapons. So again, they must believe, because they can point to it, that the person is armed. Other than that, they do not have a right, other than consent, to pat you down or even search you. Those fall under Terryville, Ohio. Even Terryville, Ohio states, unless you can point to the dangerous area, you cannot search that. So those that have questioned me in the past whenever I brought that up, it's in Terryville, Ohio. But it's also why I'm doing this type of breakdown, because I normally don't get into individual cases. So keep that in mind. Terryville, Ohio, the United States Supreme Court ruled that a person may be stopped and briefly detained by a police officer based on reasonable suspicion of involvement in a punishable crime. If the officer has reasonable suspicion that the detainee is armed, the officer may perform a pat down. There is no other reason for that. You have to be able to point to the dangerous area or what they believe. Because even in the video I showed you, where it's called from the TV show In Contempt, the young lady had the guy on the stand. She asked him, "What made you think this person was armed?" He said, "Oh, there was a bulge in their pocket." And she pulled out a necklace, something similar. Said, "What made you think this was a dangerous weapon?" And the officer couldn't explain that. So it ended up getting the evidence that was found tossed, because he did not have a reasonable suspicion that that was a weapon. He had no pretext in finding it, which is why even when I did Mallory v. Briggs, police officers don't have the wherewithal or capacity to determine probable cause, which is why I'm going to go into later why odor is not probable cause, which is why they always ask for consent, or they have you leave the doors open on your conveyance. These are the reasons they're doing certain things. They're trained to have you leave these things open. Why? Because now you have the exceptions of exigent circumstances, because you have plain view. Plain view can give them pretext to search your conveyance. Plain view can give them pretext to something else. But in order for them to do anything against someone's or infringing on one's constitutionally protected liberties, they need your consent, or they need a letter from a judge. And give me a half a second, because I actually had most of this pulled up, but then I'm using something else that I ain't got no business using. But anyway, these are things that most of us don't really have a full understanding of. And this is why I would like to have the question and answer session, because I think what I'm going to end up doing is using StreamYards on Sunday for our question and answer session, because I think that would allow people to kind of come in. You're able to ask a question. We're able to have a conversation in regards to how to perform next steps, what questions that actually might vex you on something, and even something where as simple as what happens if this isn't complied with, because you're not the only one that have compliance requirements. So, but give me a second, I got to get this stuff in. That's not what I need. See, this is what happens when you start doing a whole bunch of stuff and what you're using is on something else. And don't forget, you can hit Super Chat and support the channel through joining. The t-shirts are on sale for $25. So hit me up with your size, because we're still finishing or finalizing the website for orders. And if you give me because nothing is ever where I put it at. Okay, there we go. Now, a lot of times you're going to hear me talk about police officers as scientists. And the reason why I use that, because even in Terryville, Ohio, it refers to police officers, quote unquote, doing their job and using a hypothesis. And then they're looking for evidence to conform to their hypothesis, because that's exactly what a scientist does. They come up with an idea and then they get things to fit their idea. Unfortunately, that's not how law is supposed to work, because it's not intended to work like that. Because now, instead of dealing with fact, we're dealing with interpretations. And that's why law itself is not anything other than situational and not subjective. But it also goes into the constructs of being part of a mindset. Because if it's not done properly or not executed properly, then you're going to have other issues, which leave us into the point to where we have to go through the constructs of, there we go, that's what I'm looking for. Go through the constructs of challenging each and every aspect all the way down to the stop. And when you're dealing with that, that's when it becomes tedious. That's when it becomes difficult, because a lot of times it's no longer your choice on how it's done, but it's more a need. Simply because when I speak about correcting a behavior, that's the one thing that we don't do often enough. And unfortunately, that's the scariest part of what we're doing, because of the necessity of it. Okay. Now, as you can see, I have a little breakdown, and it's a lot of shit on here. Anyway, and portion of it, this shit is becoming annoying. The decision for Terry v. Ohio is where all your precedents come from. And the Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable search and seizures, made applicable to the states by the 14th Amendment, protects people, not places, and therefore applies as much to citizens on the streets as well as at home or elsewhere. And the sad part about it is 90% of people that are Americans and blah, blah, blah have no clue what the Fifth Amendment is or the Fourth Amendment is. And they can't tell you the constructs of it, let alone what it protects or what it restricts. And in these confines, even the understanding that our law enforcement have, they have no idea what a pat down is or a search is. Because a pat down is essentially a search, but it's done because they have visual. Remember, I told you, probable cause is something that is tangible, it's touchable. So if there's a bulge, if there's a reason to be pat down, there's something that's tangible. You can, as Tommy said, you can touch them. They're real. It's real. That's exactly what probable cause is. It's tangible, something that can be touched. It can be seen, it can be felt. That's tangible. That's where probable cause lies at. And it's not just a tip, because, the only time a tip is good is, I'll get into that later, but it's only something that has to be supported. The tip has to be supported with probable cause. It also has to be elaborate on what the actual crime is. The problem is there is not a reinforcement of crime. There's only actualities for opportunities of revenue. That's all they are. And that's the problem that we have. And I'll have a conversation probably Sunday on my ideas of police reformation and also my ideals of police defunding, because it's not necessarily defunding but refunding and understanding how it's done properly. Because right now we have a system that, while it works the way it was set up, it is horribly broken based on the things that it's supposed to actually, the ideals of what it's supposed to be doing. And before I go off into that tangent, I've got a Facebook post that I'm gonna kind of take pieces from and put up, because I want you guys to see, so you can actually get a better understanding of some of the things that I'm talking about. But again, there's going to be something Sunday that we can have a discussion on. And understanding the issues in Terryville, Ohio, is not the abstract propriety of the police conduct, because again, something that's done, or even a detention, if not handled properly, can become a false arrest, which is a police liability issue. The thing is, we have to be willing to take that next step to hold them accountable for those actions. Again, correcting that behavior, which sets up clearly established, because the more clearly established we have it, the less wiggle room they have to walk around it. And that's the problem. When police take justice into their own hands, it's because they think they're allowed to do so. It's just like a child. The more you let a child do, guess what happens? There's no longer guidance. And that's the one requirement that a parent has. Guide a child in the way they should go. Notice, in a way they should go. Because they still have free will. When you talk about something, because just like I spoke about the J. Cole issue, and that's why I hit that like button. When you come in, hit that like. Everybody hit the likes. But what I talked about with J. Cole, he had a very, very interesting view of it, because he talked about, he was asked a direct question, and it was about, do you believe there are good officers? Jay stated that that's somewhat of a conundrum, simply because how can you be good in something that's so horribly wrong or so horribly bad? And that's the things where we're doing. But the flip side of that is, like I always talk about the bully. You're going to keep getting bullied until you start hitting them back, because that's the one thing a bully don't like, is when you punch a bully back in the face. The problem is, we think talking gets us back, get the bully to back up off us. Talking doesn't do anything other than having a conversation that they don't want to have, or forces them into frustration. Why? Because they have no idea how to continue the conversation with you. Or then two, if you question what they're doing, now it's an issue, because you're a problem, because you're not just going along with anything stupid that they're doing. Because you have a low tolerance for stupidity, it's an issue. And these are the things, because it's not being corrected. When you have 95% of people complying with that foolishness, they think it's okay. They think it's right. These are the things that we're trying to reform. These are the things that need to be defunded, because my issue with most of it is the blue wall. Because then when you understand, you start taking down layers, and you understand that the police union is the blue wall itself, and then they're influencing. Again, they're influencing bad behavior. They're promoting bad behavior. They're incentivizing bad behavior. And then when people are experiencing it, unless they are absolutely getting torn to bits, they're not standing up for it. Because I always tell everybody, I'm a numbers guy, because men lie, women lie, numbers don't. When you have 95% of all people not fighting back, guess who they're going to talk to? When I've witnessed actual courtrooms being emptied because I'm asking questions, that's something that I enjoy, that, because I ask a question. I ask a direct question because of something you wrote down, because that is something written for your job. And that's the one thing they hate, when you understand their purpose and policy better than they do. They hate that. And I gave you the information about Sudlow and Sudlow. Miss Ann stated something, that due process was was at the discretion of the judge. And I asked her, I said, so Texas Code 39.14 doesn't apply to the court? Is that what you're saying? Because that is their code. That is their policy. That is their requirement. So how is it now not applying because you're telling me something completely different? And all of a sudden now the mood of the conversation changed. Like, oh my God, like, how do you know that? Because I can read. I don't always have to hit you with Supreme Court stuff. I can hit you with your stuff. I can go into your policy and tell you what your policies are. And that's the problem that they have. That's why it's an issue. When you're questioning what they're doing and not just allowing them to do crazy stuff and run rampant, it's a problem, because the system itself is not designed for those that can think. That's why they hire those that can't think for themselves. That's why they employ those that can't think for themselves. That's why they actually continue to employ those that are impulsive. Because just like you had the two officers, because I love giving this example. You have two officers. They pushed the old man that was on the sidewalk protesting. Their response was, okay, we can step over him because he was faking. He faked the blood coming out of his head. That was fake. The problem was they had no right or authority to push this man. That was the violation. What happened afterwards, regardless of what he was doing or how he was doing it, you were supposed to be trained better than that. The problem that we have is their training. So now when you say your training said you can do otherwise, the law says you can't do it, and you do it and you think it's okay because no one holds you accountable, because the police union is saying, you know what, hold on, we got you. And then 57 of these officers quit. 57 or resigned, but they kept their job. They resigned, but I'm not showing up for work for 2 days. 2 of them come back, and within 48 hours, that's how they do it. Within 48 hours, 2 of these officers are holding a man down and beating him who is complying. 2 of the same Buffalo officers that quit or resigned because they couldn't put folks in the chokehold, or they were being held responsible for things that they should not do because it's against the law. All these things that they should be upholding and should be happy about, but because they cannot get away with foolishness, they resign. Then they come back. 2 of them come back, and what they don't pay attention to is they stop a man for a tail light. All of a sudden, this requires this man to be out of his car. He's face down on the pavement. He's being choked and punched. He yells out, "Oh my God, they're gonna kill me," because one officer says, "What is he reaching for? What is he reaching for?" He tells his wife to record it. She goes to record it. Another officer tackles her, but they don't pay attention to the man across the street that's recording it. Here's my problem. One, they showed who they were when they quit. They had an opportunity to do the right thing and actually put people that knew how to do the job and weren't afraid to do the job in the position of the job, and that actually eliminated a lot of the stupidity. But then you allow them to come back, put the uniform on, because you don't want to question it. You don't want to actually hold them to the job that they said they would do. You don't want to hold them to the things that they said that they would live up to, that they swore that they would do. And then they come back and do that. But we're supposed to trust them, because even with this man complying, they still beat him. They still kicked him. They still yelled out things that could allow them to hurt him. But they're the good guys. We should comply with that. We shouldn't. But now, when we ask them to take responsibility for their actions, they don't feel that there should be any repercussions for their actions. The problem with that is every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That's science. People refer to it as karma. And even in instant karma, it generally comes back tenfold. Then we talk about seed sowing. So if I'm sowing seeds of hate and destruction, why should I not expect the repercussions of destruction and hate? Why shouldn't I expect that back? And just to give you an idea, that's one of the reasons why I don't want to give you videos where I come across as the angry black guy. I don't want to give you that. I don't want to do that. The problem is, that's where my passion lies. I'm right in that line. I'm close to being so angry where I can't stand it, but that's where my knowledge lies at. That's where the passion lies at. That's where the things that I feel you need lies at. But it's dangerous for me because that's not the image I'm trying to portray. Because I'm not anti-cop, I'm anti-bad policing. Because, like I say, I have tons of friends that are police officers. My brother's a police officer. Uncles that are police officers. I want all them bastards to get home safe. The problem is, when you're part of a system that is so screwed up and so bad, how can you remain good in that? Because when you talk about one bad apple spoils the bunch, well, when the bunch is 57 and you release them and then tell a couple of them to come back and then they do that, why are you still part of that bunch? I don't understand that, because if I know one horrible act shines a horrible light on everybody else that I'm doing it with, then I might want to change what I'm doing or change how I'm doing it. Because I'm gonna actually get back on Terryville, Ohio in a second. But I also love the fact that when I ask people about why are they so angry when they put on the police uniform, why are they always grabbing their gun and they're, oh, well, I don't know what's gonna happen. I always bring up John. John actually is a police officer in Georgia. He's been in Georgia for more than 20 years. John has been shot twice. John is one of the nicest people I've ever seen in my life, because I actually went on an accidental ride along because John was taking me to court because I was arrested for something. But he was taking me to court, and John pulled somebody over, and my question to him was, what are you going to do if you got to arrest him? Like, is somebody in the back seat, dude? You can't just throw folks in the back seat. But he cracked up laughing because he's just a nice dude. He gets out the car. He's been shot twice. John doesn't grab his gun. John doesn't walk with a whole bunch of aggression. John treats people like human beings. John understands mistakes. John doesn't write tickets just to fill up quotas. John, unfortunately, doesn't ride with anyone. Why? Because John doesn't tolerate BS. But the problem is, John's isolation illustrates the whole mindset of his department. Because he's not like many of his police officers, not the couple bad apples, the many in his police department, because he's not like them. No one wants to ride with him because he doesn't tolerate the stuff that they do. No one wants to ride with him. And then at the same time, John understands that there's a way to do the job properly, and you don't have to degrade people doing it. That's the end of it. Because while John was trained horribly, he knows he was trained horribly. John is a former military personnel. He's a vet. He understood what he was fighting for. He understood what it is that this country stands for. He still has a core belief that people are inherently good until John has a conscious effort going on to make people comfortable around him. Because you remember I talked about the Arizona police officers, killing somebody once every 5 days, and the police chief saying it's the citizens' fault. Yeah, John goes against that. John is not a part of that. But John has been alienated by his own brethren for that. Why is it when he makes a choice to do the right thing, to actually treat people like a person, other police officers don't follow suit? That's the problem that we have. That's part of the things that need to be changed. But even in going through, because I'm going to get back on subject, and even what happens in the exclusive right, the problem is police are needed, because the unfortunate thing is, just like, again, I'm going to put up something. If police were not needed, we would not have an issue of improper policing, because we would have a lot of self-discipline. We would have self-governing, and we don't have that. Most people think they're entitled to be something. They're entitled to be somewhere. They're entitled to things that aren't theirs. And again, the reason why I have a channel is because most people have no clue of what they can and can't do. That's the problem. So when you say they're not needed, unfortunately they are. What we don't need is bad policing. Because I've been to places where it is done the right way, where it's not dependent, their town's revenue is not dependent on locking people up. I've been to places where when you live in Atlanta and you have a small city such as DeKalb County, Georgia, and they're competing every month with the same number of arrests as LA County, there's a fucking problem. That's a problem. And then when you talk about we're going to stop sending out all these people, we're going to stop making all these arrests, and then when a sheriff loses, he kills his opponent, there is a problem. Because that's bad policing. No one needs bad policing. But when you can leave from that and then go somewhere where police violence is like some shit they see on TV. Because again, I can't tell you the number of times I've given stories of me being in DeKalb County, being arrested over 50 times or however many times, and there's a knee to the back of my knee in my back and a gun to the back of my head for a traffic ticket. I can't give you the number of times of that. Traffic infraction, I got a knee in my back and a gun to my head. What is the purpose? How do you get my ID from that? How do you not make someone angry from that? How does one not have some sort of complex from that? But when you're going to a place where the police don't do that at all, and police, and And when you're talking to people, they're looking like, what the hell? Like, what type of movie were you in? No, that's my life. And the crazier part is, you go to different parts of California, it's worse. Just understand that. You go to different parts of Chicago, it's worse. Because until I got to El Paso, Atlanta, as horrible as my life has been in Atlanta, I loved Atlanta with all my heart. Yeah, I won't be going back to the East Coast, because at the end of the day, I've been somewhere. I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the other side. That is exactly where I've gone through. Because when I can see proper policing being done, when I have a police chief that says, hey, come in and watch and see what we're doing wrong in training, when you have a system that is set up for 9 months of actual training before they can actually even, let alone get a taser, get a gun to actually go out, that's the type of system that everybody needs. That's the problem, because that's not something that is being implemented. That is not something that's being required. That is not something that's being requested. Nobody's talking about retraining these bastards. Because when you look at the fact that 57 guys can quit and then they still got their jobs, where they do that at? You can't quit in the NBA and still have your job. You can't quit in the NFL and still have your job. You can't do 90% of what we're looking at these police officers do and continue working. But yet they're being encouraged to be reemployed. And then 90% of what's happening is unnecessary. Excuse me, got see the angry black guy in 97-degree weather. Doesn't really flow together. But hey, hit the likes, hit that Cash App, Sprint Decisions, hit the PayPal, the Supreme Decisions. Even hit the what is that? Super Chat. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it growing. And also, don't forget to pre-order your t-shirts and join the channel. Now, enough of the shameless plug. But it's understanding that the exclusionary rule cannot be properly invoked to exclude the products of legitimate and restrained police investigation techniques. Now, when I give you the Mallory v. Briggs or Malloy v. Briggs, good God, man, Malloy v. Briggs, and it states that it is better off for a judge to make a probable cause determination because he's in a better position than the police are. And keep in mind, the judge ain't on the scene, the police are. So if somebody's on the scene doesn't have the wherewithal to make a determination of things on the scene, what does that tell you about the known training and hiring practices? Because this isn't Malloy versus Briggs is not a new case. They knew that mentally they're not capable. Emotionally, they're not capable. That is why you have things such as the MAP hearing. That is why you have things such as Wade hearing. That is why you have our adversarial system. That's why you have hated defense attorneys. The ones that do their job properly, nobody likes them. But again, they're also generally people that have gotten a large sum of money or have rich clients that just don't want to be caught. That's it. They got rich clients that want, or wealthy clients that pay them huge retainers just to say, you know what, slap on the wrist, slap on the wrist, slap on the wrist. Because you can pop a child 87 times. Guess what he's going to do 89? The same shit you just popped him for 87 times. And that's the problem that we have with that. But they're going to challenge everything that happens to them until they get what they're looking for, which is the smallest offer of liability possible. We're not doing the same thing as a day-to-day employee. We're not doing that as a challenger of the system. We're hoping and we're wishing that they go away without us looking at it, and that doesn't work. You have to be willing to look the devil in the eye, because the nature of the beast doesn't change, just the players. And that's it. And these are the things that we have to go through, because again, they need to go through their police procedures. And when their procedures are not done properly, things happen, but not until you challenge it properly. Because again, just like whenever you talk about certain things, is oh, they can ask you to get out of the car. They can. I'll give you the court case on that. However, what that does is takes away several of their exigent circumstances, because one, you're not in arm's reach to destroy evidence. That's one, so that wipes that on out. Two, you're not even in control of that situation. So that wipes that exigent circumstances. So now they put themselves more in a position to now have time to get a warrant. Just like now they have computers, they have internet, they can type, that shows up on a different system. They can actually get a judge to sign off on a warrant via an iPad for the most part. Because hell, I haven't used a pen and pencil in years, but I've used my iPad pencil like every day, because technology allows things to be done faster, which allows them to stay within their 19-minute time frame. Because again, when they're not doing these things, that's when you need to be challenging. But when you have less than 5% of people challenging these things or challenging them properly, that's the problem. Because you have less than 5%, because they've been doing wrong so long, they think it's right. They think it's accepted. And understanding the Fourth Amendment applies to stopping procedures. Whenever a police officer accosts an individual and restrains his freedom to walk, he has seized that person within the means of the Fourth Amendment. Because you remember I talked about whenever a police officer tells you to go here, sit, go over there, and it is absent of a crime, that is a Fourth Amendment violation. So when you are accosted by a police officer and physically restrained, that is a Fourth Amendment violation if it is absent of a crime. And we talked about a crime has to have someone that has an injury fairly traceable to the actions of the defendant, which would be you. There is no crime if the officer is made, oh, well, you're disturbing the peace. All right, who do I need to talk to? How am I disturbing the peace? But when you're asking certain questions, understand when you're talking about rights and privileges and the U.S. citizens, you're talking about constructs that have nothing to do with anything that I'm teaching. The construct of it is they have procedures. When they violate their procedures, you challenge them. It doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not, because the supreme law of the land dictates human being or human rights, not U.S. citizen rights. That's why you look at the Charter of the United Nations. That is the standing point of human rights. That is the standing point of federal law. That is the standing point of everything that I'm talking about. So when you nail it down to citizenship, what happens when you have someone who's not a citizen, but the police didn't follow their proper procedures? How are they getting off? How are you talking about diplomats that aren't citizens of this country, but they're still going to court or having to go to deal with certain legal issues? How are they getting off? Oh, because again, we're not talking about citizenship. We're talking about procedures of police officers and judges and those that are placed themselves into a means of servitude. So keep those constructs in mind. That's why you don't hear me talking about U.S. citizenship. I am talking about police procedures. I'm talking about Supreme Court decisions, because it's talking about the aspects of the human interaction with a government official. That's it. And a careful exploration of the outer surfaces of a person's clothing is an attempt to find weapons. It is a search under the Fourth Amendment. Now, keep in mind, I have brought up the fact that we talked about the Terry stop, and where I talked about, or the Terry pat, the pat down. And it's careful exploration of the outer surfaces of a person's clothing. Remember, officer used the word pat down. Oh, it's not a Terry search, it's a pat down. A careful exploration of the outer surfaces of a person's clothing is an attempt to find weapons, is a search under the Fourth Amendment. I thought he said it wasn't. The officer said it wasn't. But so that was a lie. Yeah. So again, understanding what that means. If it's an exploration, oh, I want to check it for your safety and my safety. No, you want to search me. Oh no, I just want to pat you down. Terry says a careful exploration of the outer surfaces of a person's clothing is an attempt to find weapons, is a search under the Fourth Amendment. Because that's what you were saying you were patting me down for my safety. Because you're looking for a weapon. And you don't have my consent. Understanding that all attempts to pat down, to frisk, to search are searches, and if not supported by probable cause and a search warrant or consent is illegal, should be challenged, also should hold them responsible for doing so. But at the end of the day, it should also be something they're trained more adversely on, because it's horrible. And when a reasonable, prudent officer is warranted in the circumstances of a given case in believing that his safety or that the others engaged are endangered, he may have a reasonable search for weapons of the person believed by him to be armed and dangerous, regardless of whether he has probable cause to arrest the individual of a crime or a absolute certainty that the individual is armed. But again, he has to be able to point to the dangerous area. He has to actually believe that there is a weapon. So again, these are things that can be asked. Do you believe I have a weapon? I don't know is not a proper response. I don't know can't get a warrant. I don't know does not allow it according to Terry v. Ohio. But these are things that we hear so often. Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know either. Because if you're going to allow it, because you have to consent to it, it's on you. But if you don't allow foolishness, then you are the one that is actually training them on what it is. The reason why I'm doing this today is because I don't do this very often, but it was brought up to me about another case, and as you guys know, I don't break down case by case and all these other precedents, even the ones that I use a lot. Terry v. Ohio is one of those cases that I use a lot. It's one of those go-to cases. It's one of those things that allow us to be better at what we're doing. But okay, what's going on here? What's going on? What's going on? Okay. There we go. There we go. All right. There we go. All right. But it's one of those where I think the more in depth we get with a few of these cases, the better the understanding we have as far as the police procedures and our abilities to maneuver through them, regardless of what it is. Because if I feel that our lack of challenging is something that is detrimental to all of us, because if you're not challenging and I am, and I'm the only one challenging, then that's a problem. But I have to give you more ammunition to challenge with. I have to give you more reason to not question a lot of the stuff that I'm giving you, but I also need to open the eyes of things that say, oh, that's why he said that. Oh, that's why he's been harping on this. Because a lot of what I talk about originates and deals directly from Terry v. Ohio. But this is something that I definitely want to kind of roll into. And it's not something I felt I could do in like 5 minutes. It's not, I did 20 videos on just this and I wouldn't even watch it. So it is what it is. But at the end of the day, this is something that allows us to be more versed with some of the things that we're doing and attempting to do, as well as be more sniper like whenever we're going through our court cases, because the better or more armed we are when we're standing up there. Because you know what, one of the things that allows you to be able to stand in front and look the devil in the eyes is actually just confidence in knowing what you're doing is right, knowing what you're saying is correct, knowing that it cannot be refuted. Those are the things that allow you to be great. And that's what I'm attempting to do. I'm trying to give you the ability to be better than you are today. And I think that's what's being portrayed here. But I also think that's why I needed to give this to you, so it can be more sniper like, I guess. But let me go ahead and finish it up. I only got like 1 or 2 more pages. Blah 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 blah. Okay. And even in here, even in Terryville, Ohio, the police must, whenever practicable, secure a warrant to make a search and seizure. That procedure cannot be followed with swift action based upon the on-spot observations of the officer on the beat is required. Okay, that didn't make any damn sense. The police officer must, whenever practicable, secure a warrant to make a search and seizure. That procedure cannot be followed where swift action based upon on-the-spot observations of the officer on the beat is required. On-the-spot observations will be exigent circumstances. When you're absent those exigent circumstances, you force them to either get consent, which is why they ask a lot of questions. Do you mind? May I? Can I? Will you? No. All of them are no. All those answers are no. Nope. Nope. You know, because it was actually my youngest son. It was funny as hell because we used to actually teach him to practice. I do not consent. I do not consent. No, I don't. And I think he said that to me more often than not because, like one time I wanted to jump on his little butt. Like, I'm like, come over here. No, I don't consent. I don't consent. And I'm like, you know what? It's gonna get ugly in here. But I understand it. But it's something that we've actually had to train him to do. Had to train him to be prepared for. Because again, there has to be a level of understanding who you are and who they are, as well as who they can and can't do that with and their procedures. But they also have to be aware of that. And whenever they go out of line, they're children. You have to correct their behavior. But you have to do that properly. You don't have to raise your voice with them. You don't have to be... You know, I actually make note of one of my situations. I was actually... Anybody that knows Atlanta and knows the neighborhood of Pittsburgh, they actually renamed it Metropolitan Boulevard. It was Stewart Avenue. So if you know ATL, Stewart Avenue is where I was at. And I was over there visiting a couple of my friends in Pittsburgh. If you know that, you know that is drug and hooker central. Police officer thought it was a great idea to tow my truck. He couldn't believe how calm I was. And he actually noted, he goes, dude, I've never seen anybody so happy. And I told him, I said, why am I sitting up here getting frustrated with somebody that's going to make sure my kids go to college? Like, why do I get upset about that? Why would you upset me? Because the problem was when he saw that I wasn't frustrated, I wasn't agitated, I wasn't irritated, that threw him off. He started asking questions. Then the problem was he had already gone 80% of the way. And I didn't let him turn around. Say that one more time. He had already gone 80% of the way. And I didn't let him turn around. They've been doing wrong so long, they think it's correct. And then those that realize that they've done something wrong, they expect you not to hold them accountable for it. That's what I'm teaching. If you're going to fight, because those that can fight should fight. Because if you don't, you're condoning their behavior. You're condoning their actions. You're condoning these foolish actions that we're seeing far too often. You're telling them that this is okay because you're not doing things to say that's wrong. And Even in that instance, when you force them to do what they're supposed to do, you're the problem. When you don't give them consent, you're a problem. I don't see why you're not cooperating, because I don't talk to strangers. Because again, that's what you're taught in kindergarten. Don't talk to strangers. Because until you know them, they're strangers. I don't give a shit who Officer Johnson is. Too many police impersonators. I don't know nothing about them because, hell, 2 weeks ago, there was a whole flock of police impersonators that got arrested by real police because someone refused to cooperate. Someone had the wherewithal to actually fight back. Someone made a phone call while they were being accosted by police, which ended up bringing the actual police there. So, understanding, standing up and making them do their job properly is the only way we get reformation. It's the only way there's any change that's going to be taking place. Okay, and now also Terryville, Ohio. A search for weapons in the absence of probable cause to arrest must be strictly circumscribed by the exigencies of the situation. Remember, there are 8 exigent circumstances. If you don't allow for consent, these are things that must be present. The exigent circumstances. If they're not, there's a challenge. Those are things, why? Because it's part of their procedures. An officer may make an intrusive short of arrest where he has reasonable apprehension of danger before being possessed of information justifying arrest. That would be the exigent circumstances. And understanding, whenever you're having these issues, whenever you're dealing with these facts, whenever you're looking at things that are circumstantial for the most part, you have to be willing, ready, and hell, for the most part, able to challenge. Because if you're not challenging, you're consenting and you're condoning. If you don't condone their actions, do something about it. That's what I got for right now. I'm actually trying to give you guys a couple other things later. Don't forget, hit that Cash App, Supreme Decisions, PayPal, The Supreme Decisions, Super Chat, hit it on there. And don't forget, the t-shirts are being made available. I love you guys. Join the channel, and I'll see you guys soon. Supreme, out.